I really kind of just really deal with some self-reflection. Like, am I truly loving better? Am I truly looking for all those places to love like Christ calls us to love, like God calls us to love? We're continuing our series on how we can love better, and we're going to continue to pick up at 1 Corinthians chapter 5, which reads, "Love does not insist on its own way," or simply, love is selfless. But before I jump into this, I want to start with a story. Every young student knows the story of Isaac Newton, right? Isaac Newton is the guy who discovered gravity because what happened? An apple fell on his head, right? And he introduced the laws of gravity in the 1600s, which basically revolutionized astronomical studies, the studies of the stars and the planets and space. And so, but few know that actually, if it wasn't for Edmund Halley, the world might have never even learned from Isaac Newton. See, it was Halley who challenged Newton to think through his original notions. Halley actually corrected Newton's mathematical errors. He prepared geometrical figures to support his discoveries. Halley coaxed the hesitant Newton to write his great work, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophies. And Halley actually edited and supervised the publication and financed its printing, even though that it was well known that Isaac Newton was way wealthier than Edmund Halley. See, historians call this one of the most selfless examples in the annals of science. See, Newton began almost immediately to reap the rewards and the benefits of his prominence, but Halley received very little credit. He did use the principles, however, to predict the orbit and return of the comet that would later bear its name, Halley's Comet. But that was only after his death did he receive any acclaim. And because the comet only returns once every 76 years, he's often forgot about until it comes back around. But Halley remained a devoted scientist who didn't care who received the credit. Hear me out. He didn't care who received the credit as long as the cause was being advanced. You know, there's some Edmund Halleys in the Bible, people like John the Baptist, who, when he saw Jesus, said, he must become greater and I must become less. John the Baptist certainly had a great following already, was causing such a stir. People were coming to hear him preach, but immediately took the opportunity to say, turn the spotlight from me and put it on Jesus. Even Barnabas, who was a great missionary, was content on introducing others to greatness. And, many people, even in our own congregation, make it their duty to pray for our pastor and for our staff. So I would like you to consider for a moment this idea of loving better. Loving better could be the goal of our salvation. What does that mean? So, see, God continues to change and work the human heart once we receive Christ through salvation. Once we became Christians, that's what sanctifying grace is all about. I'm going to try not to move too much for you guys at home because I know we're on the old school camera. And plus, I also broke my toe, I think, on Monday. So if you see me limping, it's just not because I'm hip, because it hurts, okay? But sanctifying grace is who we're becoming, more and more like Christ. And the Spirit moves us from being fanatically committed to our own sins and our own selfishness and our selfish interests and our selfish mindset and our selfish lifestyle to finding the perfect fulfillment of ourselves in love for God and for others. Okay, I feel like I've lost most of you guys in the first 4 minutes of the sermon, so I am doing great. But think about kids. Think about maybe even your youth. Like one of the first words we learn as toddlers is mine. Mine. Right? Don't take this away from me. It's mine. And parents are forced to help try to find opportunities to teach. No. It's good to share your toys or we should let other people take turns. But we inherently already know that what's mine is mine. It's mine. And we don't want to let it go. We know that from you. I don't think anybody teaches this to us. No one says, hey, now listen, this is yours. Don't let anybody touch it. We don't do that as parents. But we're constantly, inherently think of ourselves first and foremost. And I would even argue maybe this leads sometimes into adulthood. But it does remind me of a story my mom used to tell me all the time about two brothers. Kevin, who is 5, and Ryan, who is 3. And they were eagerly waiting for their morning pancakes. Kevin announces, I'm going to have the first pancake today. But Ryan refutes and says, no. I'm going to have the first pancake. And so the two boys, they continue to argue over who's going to be the first to get that coveted pancake. And the mother sees this as an opportunity for a moral lesson, right? Moms, you're so good at this, right? Oh, we're going to do this. We're going to teach. So she says, boys, if Jesus were sitting here, I bet he would say, let my brother have the first pancake. I will wait. So Kevin, who heard his mom, looks at his younger brother and says, okay, Ryan, you be Jesus. Because we inherently covet what is supposed to be ours. And although mom's suggestion is a very, very loose paraphrase, it does support Jesus' call for us to deny ourselves daily. Matthew 16:24 and 25 says, then Jesus says to his disciples, if anyone will come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for me will find it. He is calling his disciples to follow him in an incredible way. He is calling his disciples to do something that they really can't do naturally on their own. Because Jesus is calling his disciples to a supernatural journey. Because naturally we want to covet what's ours. We want to keep what's ours. But the Christian life is truly supernatural because it cannot be lived in the simple strength of human power. Not physical power, not willpower, not mental power. No human power is sufficient to follow Christ for one day. Why is this? Why is this? Because Christ calls us to deny who we are and take up the cross daily and follow him like John the Baptist. So let's get back to this passage at hand today. Pastor Tom did a phenomenal job talking about the 4 definitions or the 4 Koine Greek words for love in his last sermon. I'm not going to readdress those, but I would like to talk a little bit about how we got to where we got to in the book of Corinthians. See, the Apostle Paul was writing to the church of Corinth, and they were being very disgruntled in the fact that they all took a lot of pride in the spiritual gifts that they had. The spiritual gifts are gifts that are given to us by the Holy Spirit, and they were using these as a way to elevate themselves and unfortunately bring so much attention to themselves, they were not denying who they were. Spiritual gifts such as prophecy, tongues, preaching, administration, hospitality, giving, service, faith, healing, they're all very powerful, active in our church and in the Corinthian church. But the people were prideful, and ironically, their gifts ended up dividing the church rather than coming together to help build the kingdom. And so Paul is addressing this for 12 chapters. Is pointing out all these things. Hey, you're doing this wrong. You're just so puffed up. You're just so prideful. I'm so glad you got these gifts, but this doesn't mean this, and this doesn't mean this. And he's just kind of pointing all these out about doing all these things that they're doing wrong for 12 chapters. Even so much so describing the gifts by a way of analogy of using the human body, one body, many parts. You guys know this, but then he finally has to address the heart issue. Verse 12 goes into verse 13. Verse 12 says, chapter 12, verse 31, the verse before where we are, it says, but strive for the greater gifts, and I will show you more of excellent way. He's like, guys, all those gifts that you have, great, but they mean nothing because you're forgetting the most important thing. The most incredible displays of their spiritual gifts are worthless without genuine love. as motive. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 1 through 3 says, if I speak with the tongues of men, of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all the mysteries and the knowledge, and I have faith that I can move mountains, but I don't have love, I'm nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor, surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. He's like, people, you're missing it. I'm so glad you've got all these gifts. I'm so glad that God, you recognize that these are from God, but you're missing the most important thing out of all of that, and that is to love. And you need to love better. So then he goes on in the passage that we started last week and continue on this week through the month. He gives 15 descriptions of love. Some are positive, like love is. We read some last week, patient, right? Kind. And then some are negative, what love is not, like envious or boastful or rude. And now today we're going to narrow down on the next negative statement. Call it verse 5a. It says, it does not insist on its own way. That literal translation is more commonly that love is not selfish. You know, for the earliest part of my adulthood, I have to tell you, I was not a sharer, okay? Sharing was not something that I like to do. See, I was one of 5 boys, and we were very low income. Sometimes we were even no income. Like it was bad. At one point in time in my life, I lived in a hotel room. So we were very, very, very poor, and we got all the jokes too. You know, we weren't poor, we were po. We couldn't afford the other OR, you know? We were just po. Or the other one I loved was, you know, we're so poor, we had to eat our cereal with a fork so that way we could pass the milk down to the next brother, you know? Like, that was like, it was bad. And, you know, also, too, when you're really, really poor, you tend to have a lot of crime or break laws, too. Like, we had 7, at one point in time, we had 7 people, our family, in a 5-passenger car. You just did what you had to do. You know, when I was a kid, when I was really young, I confess this today. Hopefully there's no police officers in here that are going to arrest me, but I actually stole baseball cards from the local 7-Eleven just because all my friends had them, and I really wanted to have some to trade and be a part of what's going on in my community or my culture. Man, we just did everything I could. You know, and as a child or even as a youth, the few times that we did get a very special treat when we went out to eat or we got delivery, it was McDonald's. Listen, McDonald's is something that people can have 4 or 5 times a week now. I don't know how you do it, but you do. But for us, it was once maybe every month, maybe 2 months. And it was such a special thing to get McDonald's because, like I said, we were very poor. But the other cool thing about it, though, maybe it's not so cool, is that because we were 5 brothers, we always all got the same thing every single time. Hamburger, small fries, and a Coke. And sometimes if they were bringing it home, you didn't get the Coke, you had to drink Kool-Aid. So you got a hamburger and a small fries, and that was it. And you couldn't even customize. Like my dad would be like, Dad, can I have like extra pickles? He'd be like, no. I was like, but this free. He goes, no, because then you'll fight over it and who got the most pickles and stuff. It was the same thing. You never got anything different. In fact, funny story, one time my dad brought McDonald's home, and we were so excited. It was McDonald's night, and he brought McDonald's home, and he put the bag on the counter, and we went in, and he said, hey, dinner's on the counter. Go grab it. It's McDonald's. We're like, yeah. So we go in, and we open the bag, and we start to cry because in the bag were 5 Big Macs and 5 small fries, and we were crying because Dad forgot about us. We didn't get our hamburgers. So my dad's like, what's wrong? Why'd you eat? And he's like, you didn't buy us any burgers. We did. He goes, the Big Macs are for you. They were on sale. You would have thought Jesus just came. Like, it was a celebration. We were like, woo! We got Big Macs. It was huge. Y'all don't even understand how huge that was. So all this to say, it was kind of my upbringing. It's how I grew up. It was just kind of the way that we were, and we accepted it, and we loved it, and we were so grateful. But when I became an adult, and I could finally order for myself and pay for myself, don't even think about coming over and trying to take some of my fries. Because I'm serious. Like, I'm like, whoa. I ordered these fries. If you wanted fries, you should have ordered fries. My family would be like, can I get a fry? I'm like, no, these are my fries. These are my fries. Don't be touching my fries. You want fries? You order fries. These are my fries. Man, I was not a share until I became a father. It's funny how the Lord uses other people in your life to change. That little voice comes and says, Daddy, can I have some of your drink? Yes, you can have some of my drink. Yes, absolutely, right? But all of a sudden I'm a sharer. What happened? Love happened. I love my kid. I'm going to share and give my kid anything that they want. In reason. Within reason. Love does not demand its own way. We have a responsibility to love through selflessness. Are you still with me? We should be loving our neighbor as we love our own. So I want to turn the page for a second before we move on to the next part of verse 5. What about when people are selfish to us? We've all experienced that. We were cheated on. We were abandoned by people we thought loved us. When a parent doesn't share, it happens. Keeps it all for themselves. What about the choices of loved ones when they bring only pain and turmoil and separation? What then? Well, God is very in tune to that in your life. The psalmist writes in 119, 136, rivers of tears gush from my eyes because people disobey your instructions. It should break our hearts too. You know, I never knew my dad. I mean, my real biological father. I never knew him. My mom, she got pregnant when she was 16 years old. She turned 17 by the time she had me. Man, she wanted, from what I understand from family and friends, my mom and I, we don't talk about it too much. But from family, I learned that she really, really wanted him to be a dad to me. Like, she did everything she could. She kind of like was willing to give me his name and all of that. And he just he didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want to be a dad. He wanted to continue to high school and party and have a good time. He wanted to be a teen. He didn't want to be a dad. He told her either get rid of me or get out of his life because he had no desire to be a dad. It's pretty selfish. It hurts. But the grace of God in Christ works in a deeply sympathizing and merciful spirit in Christians who have been hurt by selfishness. Matthew 5, 7, and 8 says, God blesses those who are merciful, for they will be shown mercy. God blesses those whose hearts are pure, for they will see God. People who have experienced selfishness know sometimes things like that just draw us closer to God. And who knows where I would be today? Who knows whose I would be today if it wasn't for that grace and mercy shown by God? And selfish people, unfortunately, they're going to make their own troubles. But the grace of God can heal us from any narrow selfishness. God's grace calls us to see the suffering and to make suitable sacrifices to alleviate that suffering. So if you've been the victim of selfishness, God knows and he is with you. And hopefully you'll be able to let that fuel you as to how you can live and love selflessly. John 13:34 says, a new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. What we really need to be careful about is us hurting people like they've hurt us. Because that never works. Romans 12:17-21 says, never pay back evil for evil, but do things in such a way that everyone can see you are honorable. Do all that you can to live in peace with everyone. Dear friends, never take revenge. Leave that to the righteous anger of God, for the scriptures say, I will take revenge. I will pay them back, says the Lord. Instead, if your enemies are hungry, feed them. If they are thirsty, give them something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals of shame on their heads, but don't let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. See, I believe that love is an utter enemy to selfishness, because love is not self-seeking. All right. Now, before we move on to the last part of our verses, I want to make you clear that Paul nor Jesus want us to deny ourselves out of any regards or cancel out regards to ourselves. He doesn't suggest that the way we should love is ever to neglect ourselves or other interests, but love must root up the principle of selfishness, which has come into our nature. All right? All right, so let's move on. Verse 5b goes on to say, it is not irritable. So basically, it's not easily angered. Let's begin at just a principle level. All you have to do is live for 24 hours until you'll be in a situation in which you are irritated. I promise you. Or you're tempted to be irritated. See, irritability is related to our sense of being pushed beyond what is reasonable for a normal human to have to endure. We all have a threshold where we say, I'm going to allow a person a reasonable amount of inconsiderate behavior, because after all, nobody's perfect. So a reasonable amount. Or I'm going to allow a person a reasonable amount of imperceptiveness, because I'm aware that I've been dense a time or two in my own life. But at some point in time, they've crossed that line and we're irritated. So now I have the right to either mentally berate them or punish them through my visible irritation, because they should have gotten it by now. For example, and feel free to nod with me if you can relate to these at all. We'll just see. Well, you're like, Tony, I am a child of God. I do not get irritated at people. Oh, yeah? Let's go through this list. You see someone who is in your view not being careful and not paying attention, and they knock your phone off the table. Okay, you give them grace. But then they do the very same behavior again with the same result again 20 minutes later. What about a third time? Oh, yeah, I'm getting pretty irritated at that. Other sources like this. If you're smart, sometimes, greatest sources of irritation are connected to our points of greatest giving. So here's what I mean. If you're smart, you get irritated sometimes at people who might learn a little slowly. If you're intuitive with people, you're irritated at those who don't seem to get it. Yeah. If you're athletic, you get irritated at people who can't seem to do the simplest athletic move. If you're musical, you get irritated when someone practices and still can't get it right. If you're sympathetic, you get irritated at those who are not. We can get irritated when people forget things and feel like you shouldn't forget things. We get irritated when our preferences aren't remembered. I told you I don't like that flavor ice cream. We get irritated when people when they ask us to do something that we feel they should be able to do. Can you give me a drink? Your leg's broken? Get your butt up and get a drink. Why are you asking me to do that? We can get irritated with drivers who aren't paying attention when the light turns green. Oh, man, all the heads are just like this right now. Yep. We get irritated with just the general increase of traffic due to people moving to Port Orange. Yeah, look like bobbleheads in here. We get irritated at slow checkout lines. We get irritated when a coworker doesn't pull his or her own load, keeps playing on their phone. You're probably getting irritated at me for making you feel irritated right now. There's no short of irritable things in this world, and we're going to experience a lot of them all the time. But the text here says that love is not irritable. And interesting, there's no other caveat that goes with it. Love is not irritable unless, it doesn't say that. It just says irritability is just sweepingly categorized as unloving. If you get irritated with people, it's unloving. Love is not irritable. All right, last one. Finally, it keeps no records of wrong. Some in the Corinthian church at this point in time were bringing lawsuits against other Christians. Instead of settling church matters amongst themselves in a spirit of humility and love, they were dragging each other to court. And Paul makes a very firm stand on this in 1 Corinthians 6:7. He says, in fact, to have lawsuits at all with one another is already a defeat for you. You've already lost. Why not rather just be wronged? Why not rather just be defrauded? To combat this attitude of give me what is mine, Paul writes that love keeps no records of wrong. In fact, might I say it is better to be cheated than to be unloving. Jesus Christ, he provided the ultimate example of this type of love. On the cross, he paid the price for the sins of the world. Romans 5:8 says, but God proves his love for us, that while we are sinners, Christ died for us. And he keeps no records of wrong. You know why? Because on that cross he prays, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So often people say they love each other, but as soon as one gets angry, out comes a list of sins that we've been carrying or holding on to. Accusations fly, painful memories are dredged up, and bygones are no longer bygones, and this is not love. True godly love forgives and refuses to keep track of personal slights received. The focus of love is not one's own pain, but the needs of the loved one. So obviously, we shouldn't continue to allow people to hurt us or abuse us or anything. That's not what 1 Corinthians 13:5 is teaching us. The goal is to have a spirit of reconciliation and to forgive those who seek forgiveness, letting the past stay in the past. Some people have an axe to grind, but Christian love seeks to bury the hatchet. Love keeps no records of wrongs. For we forgive as Christ has forgiven us. Pastor Tom spoke last week about how Jesus replied when Peter asked, hey, how many times are we supposed to forgive someone? 7 times? And we know Jesus' response is, no, not 7. 70 times 7. I just got home from camp last week. And one of the things we do a lot at camp is participate in some alternative worship experiences. That can look like a lot of different things. Sometimes it's coming to the altar and drawing something, or sometimes it's maybe dipping our hands in water to represent something, or holding on to an object while we worship. Something sometimes that takes what we're hearing and learning to just the next level. To not just the hearing stage, but the doing stage. And so today I'd like to offer an opportunity for you to consider reflecting on how maybe you've missed an opportunity to love better. Specifically, maybe you have found yourself being selfish. Maybe you identify that you get irritable really, really quick, and you don't usually show love that way. Maybe you're holding on to records of wrongs of someone who hurt you. Or someone you love. If that's you today, I just want to give you the opportunity as a Christian to perhaps bury the hatchet with me. In this bucket, I have a hatchet or a small axe. I don't really know the difference between the two. But what I'd like you to do in our final song, to come on up, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to spend a moment at the altar in prayer, and then take a shovel, if you so choose. If you don't do this, the hatchet won't get buried. So, our facility and finance team is probably very happy that I'm putting plastic down. And then after you pray at the altar, maybe you come over and you take an opportunity and a shovel to help me bury this hatchet. Once and for all. As a confession to the Lord and as an opportunity, maybe this is an opportunity for you to forgive somebody who has wronged you, who has been selfish to you. I wasn't sure if I was going to add this last part, but I think I will. About 20 years ago, I was going through a few medical issues, and I felt like it was time to search out my dad, my biological father, to try to get some answers to some of the medical things I was dealing with. And so I looked up his name in the city I thought I lived in, and I found his obituary. He had died at 45 years old. But the real part, it went through kind of what an obituary does, talks about all his situations and who he was in, and it's at the bottom it says, he was survived by one son. And it wasn't me. They had listed his one son as a son he had a little bit later on in his life. And so I'm just an afterthought. I wasn't even considered his son. And so I think for me, today is about starting with forgiving my dad for being selfish and being reminded to never do that to anyone else. Peyton is going to play some music and give you an opportunity to come as the Lord leads.